Last night, when I crept into the back of your reception a little bit late, Esser, thankfully found me and sort of pulled me aside. And we sat down, and a bunch of us kind of got together, and we were talking about various topics. And I was interested naturally in conversation. We were talking about, Samsung. We talked about IBM's Watson. We, of course, talked about Formula One quite a bit. And I realized all these things are things I'm talking about in my presentation. So it was one of two things. I said either this entire intro to your introduction to this company was either brilliantly stage managed ahead of time by Theo and Esser, or if that's too much conspiracy theory for this hour of the morning, maybe I'm just hanging around with the right kind of people. I'm willing to accept the latter, although I suspect it may be both. I don't know. First of all, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to meet you, and it's a pleasure to be here with you today. Very often when I'm asked, whether it's an interview or just a conversation, about this idea of killing giants, that first question comes out, and we have to wrestle with this thing. Exactly what is a giant killer? What is this kind of company? And I've always kind of, talked around it. I'd love to be able to say they're all left-handed, first of all. They're all, it's something very easy, and of course that isn't the way it works. But I had a conversation last month. It was a little bit out of the blue, and a company called me up, and it was an unusual call for me because usually the kind of company that I speak to is very much in that, underdog position and really fighting against a big brand. This company was a big brand. It wasn't just a Fortune 500. It was like a Fortune 100. And I didn't mean to say it. I kind of blurted this out in the conversation. I said, I'm sorry, I just have to ask, why are we having this conversation? And I don't mean to be rude, but you're a very well-known company. You're well-respected. I know you. What's on your mind? And this gentleman said something to me that I wanted to share with you because I captured this so brilliantly. He said, we're number 2, and we hate it. And I thought this was the best one-sentence description of this mindset. It's not that we have to be number 1. It's that we hate it when something's blocking our view. There's a mindset. There's something inside. There's a burning in the heart, in the blood that says, I don't like my competitors very much. I need to take share from these people. I have to. People who feel this way, these stories compel me. I'm sure they compel you too. That's a wonderful quote here from Robert McKee. Do you know Robert McKee? He is the screenwriting guru who has mentored pretty much all of Hollywood for the last 2 decades. The stories are equipment for living. They give us this experience of living, as Joseph Campbell would say. And in that spirit, I sort of want to talk to you today about those stories. I want to share those stories because I do think that these stories are equipment for living. I do think we can listen to the experiences of some of these giant killers. It doesn't matter what industry they're in. Because, as you know, you have a very unique business. No example is going to be perfect. But these companies and these stories that we start to collect around us and we start to learn from, I find extremely inspiring. These giant killers come from everywhere. When I had a chance to go down this path and do the research behind this book, I talked to over 80 of really some of the most interesting people I've ever met all over the world, from townships of South Africa to Silicon Valley to everywhere in between. And these people get out of bed every morning and their feet hit the floor and they go to the office and they compete against companies very often that on paper should be able to roll over and crush them. And yet for some reason it doesn't work out that way. Some reason they're able to survive and they thrive and they win. And we love these stories. This is a timely story, no doubt. When we are dealing with this either-or market condition, we have to do more with less. We have to be extremely smart in the way we're approaching this. We don't have the money, the budgets, the head count, sometimes even the time on the clock that we used to rely on a few short years ago. If it doesn't apply specifically to you today, congratulations. It certainly applies to the people that we're doing business with. But if it's a timely story, I think we can also agree inherently that it's a very timeless one as well. We look around this room and we see people from cultures where the hero myth is alive and well. We love stories of companies that are emerging, that rise up and are able to do these incredible feats, because it gives us hope and it reminds us that these things are possible and that we're doing it right. It's okay. I was fortunate, and gentlemen, thank you, Theo and Esser, for sharing some time with me before I got here and just giving me a brief glimpse into the challenges that you face here at this company. I wanted to share some of the feedback, some of the briefing that I got, because I think it's a very helpful grounding in what we're going to talk about. First things first, how do we navigate the shift from traditional to next generation? This is a very universal question. I hear this often, and I think it applies to you very clearly. How do we deal with slowing growth in our core markets? Sure. I think this is a universal fear, a universal concern. How do we move from providing content to these next generation full information systems? Yeah, these are great, these are meaty topics, and they're ones that I think we have to keep in mind as we move forward and as we talk about this subject. To put some order around the potential chaos of having a conversation this wide-ranging, I wanted to share with you sort of three big ideas, and it's kind of emerged in talking about this topic often. As entertaining as it would be, I'm sure, to bowl through the entire content of a book here on stage with you this morning, I think it's probably a little bit more efficient for us to focus on a few major movements. When I've gone down this path, I've found that it neatly falls into what I would call three areas of excellence, sort of three movements. What I would characterize these giant killers as being very adept at. First and foremost, these companies, this mindset produces a real skill in seizing the narrative, in hijacking the conversation, in shifting an anchor point to ground of your own choosing. Second, very, very adept at changing the rules of the game. If seizing the narrative is a question of shifting perception, this is very much a question of shifting structure in how an industry works. And lastly, there's this big topic of translating ideas into action. This is not a cursory conversation about culture, and it's not a simple essay on execution, because I know from experience, if I ever say those two words again, you're all going to check email. I get that part. This is the very rare skill of taking an idea from the whiteboard stage and driving it into the market to implementation in a way that materially affects the financial success of the company. I hate to have to say it, but yeah, it's a very rare skill. As I said before, stories are equipment for living. I want to share some of those stories with you now. I want to take it from the top. I want to start with seizing the narrative. And I need you to squint at these stories, because they're not exactly in the bullseye of your day-to-day business. But I trust that you can extract the meaning from them and read the subtext and understand what is the essence of this and how does it apply to us here. Let's talk about seizing the narrative. There are two kinds of warfare, asymmetrical and stupid. What a great quote. This is Dr. Conrad Crane. This is actually Alexander the Great, frankly. But the quote, I should be clear, is from Dr. Conrad Crane from the U.S. Army War College. He's one of my country's experts in guerrilla warfare. A fascinating guy. And he reminds us, this is a wonderful metaphor, he reminds us that it is never incumbent on us to fight the fight that the giant expects us to. Quite the opposite, as we know. It's our job to leverage our strengths. It's our job to do what they don't want to see